Tonight I'm really happy to welcome all of you and our dear guests and colleagues for this event at the continuation of the public program of Kyiv Perennial project, the Kyiv Biennial edition in Berlin, taking place at nGbK between Bridges and Station Urbane Kulturen in Hellersdorf, which is another location of nGbK. And first of all, I would like to express my deep gratitude to my dear friends and colleagues, Lyuba Knorozok to my left, to Nataliya Gumenyuk and Raji Abdul Salam, who are the participants and members of the international initiative called Reckoning Project Ukraine Testifies, which is perhaps one of the most significant initiatives established in the first weeks of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine almost 2 years ago, pretty much run by Nataliya and her colleagues. It involves the Ukrainians as well as other journalists, researchers, data analysts from different countries, as well as filmmakers and researchers who intend to document Russia's war crimes against Ukraine and create visual as well as textual stories which would become the historical documents of the ongoing war. And just to introduce shortly each of our participants today, Lyuba Knorozok to my left is a film producer and cultural manager, and she is a producer of the Reckoning Project initiative, and among her latest projects are the films that we are going to watch today, Chornobyl 22, as well as Infinity According to Florian, both by Oleksiy Radynski, also our dear friend and colleague, who will, by the way, not be present here personally, but he will have his screening event here at the same place on the 26th of April. Raji Abdul Salam is a legal data archive analyst with experience in documenting war crimes and attempted genocides in Syria and Iraq, and he has been investigating many testimonies and contributing to holding Syrian war criminals and perpetrators accountable under universal jurisdiction in Germany, Sweden, and Belgium. And Nataliya Gumenyuk is perhaps one of the most prominent Ukrainian journalists and author specialized in foreign affairs and conflict reporting. She is the founder of the Public Interest Journalist Lab and the author of several documentaries and books. And we were very proud to publish one of her books called Maidan Tahrir at our Visual Culture Center in Kyiv, and she writes regularly to international media outlets and provide commentaries for global media. Thank you so much for coming. I'm also very happy that the Reckoning Project kindly agreed to share its documentaries, so basically on a permanent basis at this site till the 1st of April. You can see 4 of the project's documentaries here at the exhibition place, which intended to be so because this exhibition doesn't include only RT productions, but almost in a bigger part, really documentary and research-based works that contribute to, I hope, general cause. So just to start our discussion today and the presentation, first of all, I think for our audience here in Berlin, would be really very interesting to hear from all of you, since you represent actually quite various backgrounds. Maybe you can just describe in general how did the whole initiative, the Reckoning project, emerge? How did it come into being? What is your structure? What is your modus operandi? How do you operate? How many people do you have? And perhaps a bit on your methodologies, because you intend to document the war crimes, as you say, in a kind of a neutral manner, so that they are accountable for litigation and to be real evidences in the court. So what does this neutrality mean, and how do you approach witnesses for that matter?
So what we actually do, we started very early at the stage of the after the full-scale invasion. The number of the people with different backgrounds joined. We were working in Ukraine, but not just in Ukraine. Among us, there were, one of the best Ukrainian reporters and the journalists and filmmakers. But also, we gathered together with international journalists and analysts who had experience of the war crimes in different countries, like Raji, for instance, who'll speak for himself. What we understand that of course during the war the crimes are committed, and the journalists, first of all, they do approach the witnesses of those war crimes, and usually for a journalist you just meet the people and you write the story. For us it was very important what you do else. So because it's usually very traumatic experience for the people to say, and we try to do that once. So what we really do, we talk one time mainly. The court talk is one time with direct survivors or the witnesses of the potential war crimes. It's not just a person who's seen something or a person who lived through something, but a person who potentially can be seen by the court as the victim, and whose statement can be important for investigation or litigation. And then we ask, in pretty journalistic manner, in a professional journalistic manner, too many questions, which would help us to, for future, recreate the historical evidence of what happens from the whole day, of what this person saw and experienced, but also in a way that our questions won't be leading, that everything which is recorded won't be challenged, that we forced person to speak this or that way. We started at early stage, but in spring 2022, when we gathered in Kyiv together, including with Raji, we really thought like how we also can use the international experience, so created rather unique questionnaires where we know that what would be the questions for a person who lived through the missiles attack, or the person who lived through the tortures. And within the course of the war, the new crimes appeared: the deportation of the children, the attack on the environment, like Kakhovka dam explosion, and other things. And when we record these testimonies, we use them in different ways. We create a database, we create the summaries, more or less analytical papers, which could be used by the lawyers, which could be used by the litigators in a way that is handy for prosecutors, while the very same material is used for journalistic articles, for the films, for the books, for exhibition, but the person is not supposed to speak too many times. So in fact, like one long interview, one long testimony made in the best way possible, also including, in a way that it's not harmful for the person, because of course we understand it's extremely sensitive. We were trained how to do that properly. So we try to do three things at the same time: do what the lawyers do what the journalists do what historians do. All the people of truth-seeking professions kind of got together to record this memory. I later would be very happy also to share why I think the history matters so much after especially 2 years of the invasion, and what is the difference of looking at our initial steps, 2 years after. But probably with this I'll pass the mic to the colleagues.
Thank you. Hi. As my colleague and Vasily introduced me, one of the things that really challenged me since so many years, more than a decade now, when you want to work with a testimony that comes from a human being, because the power of an evidence that you want to submit in a court is so different and so powerful when it comes from a human being. Because if you want to build a court case, you need a human figure to come and say, I got 1, 2, 3, I witnessed 1, 2, 3. And the thing that pushes us in a very, let's say, complicated realm is this human figure has to have certain things, has to meet certain conditions. And this is where my job starts to be essential, is to make sure that this person, when he talks something, first of all, is admissible in the court, and at the same time, it has the merit, the legal merit, and of course, in a certain way, my colleagues can tell you about the humanistic merit that we can translate it in media, like the movies and other stuff, because it's very important to understand a certain crime through a certain contextual elements of this crime, but there is a humanistic side in it. And if I take it back to my job is to make sure that this person, that we are taking their testimony or his testimony or her testimony or their testimony, basically are mentally and physically fit. And usually I'm a bit autistic. I'm not shy to say it. So when I am trying to take the actual testimony, I lack the humanistic depth. So I did traumatize my actual witness when I was asking him the wrong way the questions. And for that, we started to make sure that the actual person who are collecting the testimony have this understanding. For that, one of the basic things within our methodology is to understand the concept of doing no harm. That means we don't traumatize the person, we don't give hard promises, we will take your case to the court. No, we promise them that we will make sure that their right to access justice is preserved. Because if you look at the Ukrainian judicial system, they are overloaded. They can't process the whole cases. Yugoslavian ex-war, up till today, we have testimonies that is not processed. Imagine, more than 20, 30 years of work. So we make sure that the first something is do no harm, is being respected. And the second thing, we make sure that the actual person that are taking the actual testimony or meeting the person is making sure that they understand what they are doing. Because every documentation has its own merits. And within the Reckoning project, what we are trying to do is to make sure that the testimony collected meets the minimum legal standard under a certain jurisdiction is met. That means a certain contextual element of a crime under universal jurisdiction in Germany, they call them core international crimes, is met if we are talking about torture. If we are talking international criminal law, it's a different category. So we are trying to pressure our head in Kyiv, actually, to make sure that these questions are so simple, but at the same time reflect the values that we are trying to search. After that, we try to authenticize the actual testimony. And this is by a process called the CCC. CCC stands for the correct, coherent, and what is the last C? I have to remember. Okay, the first one is correct, concrete, and coherent. That means the actual testimony that they are telling me as a story started to change from something that I correctly taken from the actual person to a concrete facts. So the stories start to have to be based on facts rather than a story. And the last one is the coherency, when we run this testimony against other testimonies in the same incident and supportive evidence. So this is back to my job, and then we keep it in our archive, and I don't give it to anyone. No. And then I share it with my team. I will stop here because I cannot.
You're becoming complicated, Raji.
Okay.
Yeah, just, hey, yeah. I just wanted to add that how we came to this in a way, because we are all from different backgrounds. Like I'm working in documentary, Nataliya is in media, more journalism. Raji is a data analyst, it's legal. We never actually experienced that, expected, I would say, that we would work, like as an artist, we would work really close with the lawyers and legal workers. Like it was something never expected for us before, and as a result of the project, it was really huge positive surprise how we could both benefit from each other. Because for us, as we are doing this interviews and recording the testimonies in a very specific, detailed way, and we obliged to ask so many weird small questions we never would ask as authors, as historians, as a journalist, as a documentary. We never would ask something like which color was it, or I don't know, which shoes was wearing, like anything. Like there are many really small legal details, and but we really benefited out of it, because some of these questions opened really unexpected stories from the memories of the people, and that's how we went deeper and deeper. And oh, you disagree? No, and yeah, so, and the people was like in the very beginning of war, the team of Public Interest Journalism Lab, who's like authors and founders of this project, was everywhere, like on the front line, recording, documenting everything. But it's everything what we call now kind of fast food information. Like when you go and report, that's what you see in the news, like amount of dead bodies per kilometer, and that's it. So there is no human story, nothing behind of it. And also people, they sharing, giving lots of interviews, they talk to this media, but then there remains nothing for the history, nothing for the advocacy, nothing for the actually the story, and that's why we decided to do this project and actually preserve all these testimonies in the best ways possible for further use. And yeah, because people forgetting everything in 1 week. It's just a human body. We just survive like this. We don't want to keep all the small details. And that's why our archive with all these testimonies, with all the detailed recordings, we can, as authors, I can work with this material as a filmmaker. We can come back, we can further like go deeper, tell the stories in the different ways, concentrate on different topics. But this archive exists, and this is like really a unique record of the history, very important one.
So maybe I also would probably summarize. So you, for instance, can have 4 movies here which are on the exhibition. It's about one of the biggest one-time attacks on the Kramatorsk train station. It's about the occupation of the hospital, the occupation of one village, and the first bombardment of big city Chernihiv. But every person you see is really everything she or he said potentially can be used by the litigators. And it's a very different way from how you see the cinema. And for me as a journalist, it's such a benefit to work in this way. Just yesterday, I was speaking to a different man who just escaped one of the occupied towns in Zaporizhia region. And it was for me so fascinating, besides everything, to talk to him and understand how horrible his story is. But because we recorded one of the testimony in 2022, another one in 2023, but I figured out that all those people were in the very same cell during the same time. I actually managed to connect them because I spoke to, because they were lost. You know, one left with a clean phone. He didn't have the context of the previous one. According to our methodology, I wouldn't really tell like, oh, I know the guy, his name is that. I just say like, and who else was on your cell? And he would say like, and this guy who had a cafe. And I said like, okay, you actually know him, and he has a cafe now in Kyiv. So, you know, it's really something which is so big as a life, but on the use of that, something also to say. I'm among the journalists, among many Ukrainian and non-Ukrainian journalists, I'm this kind of bit weird one which believes that the journalism really is a great profession. It can change the world. I really believe that every my article matters. Every word I write has sense, and I believe in this profession. Most of the people are not like that, including the journalists themselves. And they were coming and telling, look, you know, we want finally do something more meaningful. We want to write the story. So maybe if we would record it, it would go to court, and there would be sense in my work. And then I saw the lawyers who said, like, look, actually what we are doing, if there is no articles, if there is no public attention, if there is no record, all is in vain. Nobody cares. So in fact, don't rely on us lawyers. Write your stories. And then I understood that everybody is frustrated. Filmmakers frustrated, journalists are frustrated, lawyers are frustrated. But when they work together, it actually works. And I believe that in fact today that's how you do. You do some of the things today, you do some of the films for festivals and for, you know, being exhibition, but you do the article which can move the story. And I later heard from the prosecutors, that's how the world works today. They really honestly say that, Nataliya, unless the story is published, there is no chance the court case would be opened.
I just want to add to this because we had a meeting last summer 2022 from one of the prosecutors who worked on the case of Milosevic in Zeroes in Den Haag in the ICC, and he said that actually if they would have the same amount of media attention to the process and to all the testimonies, they would not do so many mistakes that they did, because they kind of had no control over the public in the process of each decision. And nowadays, he said, like, that's a big advantage that they, like, so actually prosecutors are also eager to have the public attention to their work, which was surprising. So, and some more impact of the films and media works I would share probably after we will see the movie, because there are also some, in addition to the film itself, there are also some direct impact that was after publishing this.
Yeah, right. Just a short question as a follow-up, because exactly from a juridical point of view, just as you, Lyuba, put it so precisely, this kind of ongoing fast food information and coverage in the local as well as international media. So as we can understand from the outside, that your approach is very much based on selecting the exact cases that took place or that happened. So you basically take some cases from the ongoing atrocities that we observe almost actually online, but also, yeah, in a juridical sense, whom do you work with, and how did you find your way to the legislators, to the courts? Are you working with someone in The Hague? What is the pragmatic, a practical side of your work, and how you bring exactly your evidence to the court so it's accountable?
I'll pass it to Raji before maybe explaining that no, it's a bit more complex and not that fast. Yes, because it's now I can really honestly say that there would be just some of the cases investigated internationally and not just out of ours. After the hundreds of the people we talk, maybe there would be the few. What we do, we pass what we can in the format which is acceptable and could be digested by the prosecutors which have this abundance of crime. So we pass like the summaries, and when they need more details, we provide the details upon their request, because if it's too much, they can't. They would explode. They can't accept too much. We do have the other ways when the lawyers do different submissions for the, various bodies, including ICC, but also OSCE, UN, and various commissions, or where there are questions on request. But we probably would go for, a few cases of universal jurisdictions. That's what is our capacity. But for other bigger stories, we think the most of the crimes would be investigated in Ukraine, and to extent which can give at least the summaries to the prosecutors, so it would be like a pieces of the puzzles that they would miss. We would be there to give them. We never know what it is. But maybe I would explain, Raji, as well, that you can't create, you record individuals and then you see the patterns. You need time to understand what's going on. It's not like one person is a crime. One person is one crime and one tragedy. But maybe you can speak what kind of a patterns we already found and why it's not about one individual, that it cannot be judged that way. It's a bit more complex.
Okay, just to make sure, none of all the cases that I work in and my mentors work in, one entity could create the actual case. Basically what happened is we bring what we have, other people brings what they have. For example, Koblenz, that happened here. And also one of the things, when we started to work on Koblenz, more than 127 organizations and legal entities were working on it, presenting witnesses. And the prosecutor in Karlsruhe was saying, I will preserve it until better evidence comes, because we didn't have the public pressure. When after 1 year we started to see that the prosecutor will never open the case, so what we did, we started to do publications, media publications. It started to be a public opinion. This guy is a war criminal. He did crimes against humanity in Syria, and he's now receiving Burger Guild. At that time, it was called the Job Center Guild or something like this. I don't know. So basically, this guy is a war criminal that is now being sponsored here. So the prosecutor was forced to open the case, and after 4 years with all this evidence, and it was big process. The same goes for Ukraine. Now, for example, we are leading in certain things, but not alone. So many other entities are helping in that. And I'm not gonna talk because I'm not supposed to talk about the corporation. There is confidentiality and other stuff. But I talk about the simple things. Everyone in Ukraine, at certain points, we started to understand how the machination of the filtration camps started to work. So people were saying, oh, people are taken, they are doing security vetting for them. And then we started to find certain pattern that is starting to pop up. Every time Ukrainian travels as a family, the kids are being moved away. So, okay, it's the process. You move the kids away. But what happened to these kids? Then we discovered in the case of Matvey, actually, we did a piece on it, that the kids were being deported, trafficked to a certain place, then to a certain place, then to a certain place. And then we started to look on more and more narrative. And then we started to establish that there are routes supporting that. And there is a sponsor from the government, Russian government, to do that. And they even push it to create an infrastructure to assimilate these kids in Russia. It was crazy. We were talking about filtration, we discovered kids deportation. So this is how you find the pattern. One of the things about what Lyuba was saying, the question that I made all the team annoyed, were they wearing suits? What they were wearing? What kind of shoes? Did they have any symbol? Did they have any chevron? And the team were saying, God, of course they didn't. Then we established that from day one, the Russian soldiers were hiding their identity. Okay, why they are hiding their identity? Because they want to do misconducts. So many crimes that they did, like extrajudicial killing and looting, if you look at them, it's against the disciplinary laws and bylaws of the Russian army. They have a really nice one. If you read it, oh, it's amazing. Then you discover that all these misconducts supposed to have disciplinary action. With all our archive, only 2 cases that one got reprimanded, and the other guy, they molested a lady, and they promised her he will never come back. So in all our archive, we have 2 cases. Then we looked, we discovered that these actions, the misconduct, it started to be widespread attack. So these actions now, is a systematic action repeating itself through culture. So usually the armies have the disciplinary action to stop such action. The Russian didn't do that. That means this is a state of impunity, a crime against the humanity. That the first one, the government is responsible on, and then the army commanders are responsible for all this widespread attack, another crime against the humanity. And this is the importance of pattern. You don't start to talk about actual war crimes now. They are connected by the repetition, by the culture, by the systematic. And for that, you have to look at them in a way that they are organic somehow. It's a process. And when you prove the elements of process there, it started to be a crime against the humanity. And God forbid, when the damage to a certain population reaches the point that the population can recover as a part or as a whole, now we are discussing attempted genocide. And this is something that is, up till now, we knock on the wood that the Ukrainian population are able to recover. But what would happen if these things continue for years? We don't know.
Yeah, I will perhaps get back to the issue of genocide a bit later, because I think in particular for this country it's of, let's put it, special sensitivity. But as we are going to watch Chornobyl 22 documentary by Oleksiy Radynski, and Lyuba is a producer of this film. So this documentary won a Grand Prix at Kurzfilmtage Oberhausen last year. So perhaps, Lyuba, you can just quickly present the background of making this documentary before we watch it, and then we can get back to it later. Because we know that you, as well as the filmmaker himself, Oleksiy Radynski, you both have been having quite a long-ranging interest and research in the Chernobyl region and the nuclear power station itself. What was your experience there, and how did you manage in general to get there in the right aftermath of the Russian invasion?
Yeah, like when reckoning started, we each of us kind of choose the precise topic, so we didn't start from the scratch. And Oleksiy and me, as you mentioned, was working with the topic of Chernobyl exclusion zone for many years for the different purpose, for the purpose of fossil fuel colonialism or for atomic post-Soviet, like Soviet colonialism. And so we decided like to not to jump in some other places, but to continue our research just in another weird form. And yeah, so I don't want to talk more about, like, that's how we started to work with this topic precise, and we are still working with the Chernobyl story. And it's also kind of was the first crime, I would say, like nuclear terrorism, because the Russian army came to exclusion zone and was hiding there in kind of undercover of nuclear dangerous objects, so nobody would be shelling back because nobody would do this in the atomic side. And that's kind of was obvious for us to work with this topic, yes, but I think I will not do any other spoilers. So and I hope there will be some questions afterwards.
Right, yeah. Immediately afterwards. Yeah, I think we can start the film. Yeah. The public will have some questions perhaps later on, but I just wanted to pick it up exactly where the documentary itself left it, in a way, since the case which is represented here is basically not just something from the past, right, of the 2022, but as we all know, that the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, an active one, it's still being occupied and actually totally mined by the Russian occupants in Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, right? And I was just thinking to ask you, do you work with this situation? What does it take to get any documentaries or evidences from that side, especially after the blowing up of the Kakhovka Dam? Like, how do you approach that totally unprecedented situation? Because, I mean, there have been so many parallels to be drawn with regards to the Russia's ongoing war, but what is indeed totally unprecedented is that this is a terror attack of just unbelievable scale. How do you approach that? Yeah.
So that probably would be around next week, the article in the Atlantic, my article, with a number of the team published, particularly on the occupation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. It's kind of through the latest fact-checking things all the last days. And yes, it's horrific. I think we all fully misunderstand and not fully understand what's going on. I just yesterday spoken to the person who left Enerhodar a couple of days ago, like last week. And just to understand, I'll try to describe. Can you imagine a town where out of 11,000, there were 50,000 people lived in the town. Out of them, 11,000 people were the employees of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the biggest in Europe, which makes it like every family member works there. It's a town which is hostage. Now there are maybe 17,000 people, and instead of 11,000, there are 3,000 or 4,000 people are working. And if there is a very special license to operate the nuclear power station, you actually more or less like astronaut. You have a background check, psychological check. Out of the 200 people who were licensed, just 60 remained. And for many years, people are really literally taken for the incredible tortures, including the numbers of employees. Just our team spoken for around a dozen of the people who left and who stayed, including myself. I spoke just for a couple of them. For 3 of them, the other journalists did it. I know that the other organizations spoken to them. I had a chance to spoke to the head of the Ukrainian nuclear, authorities. And it's dangerous in every way. And I think while talking to the Western editors, they were all trying to describe what is the theory of the catastrophe. And the most important to say that, look, everything can go wrong. In fact, we need to understand that out of the 6 blocks, they are stopped. But the point, even with Chernobyl, you really need to have a very special people to run it. And these people are persecuted. And, instead of, even in an unusual way, I remember I had friends whose parents worked there during COVID, that, they were treated as astronauts, because you can't miss one person having COVID who works for Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. That would be scandalous. And now you imagine just small part of them working, and, you can be taken out of your place for interrogation, humiliation, electrocution. And what is a big problem like that, and this is more or less like eternal problem, which for me still for a journalist hard to absorb. The occupation of the nuclear power station somehow isn't really considered, to be honest, when we talk to the lawyers and everybody, as something as exceptional. It's first of all, it's a very expensive object, but the fact that they overtaken it, it's as if you overtake any other object. It's a crime, it's a war crime, but it's not like that significant. And there are talks that we generally need to change the legislation, because it has never happened in history that the armed forces overtaken such a dangerous object. That's the one thing. The other thing is, yes, International Atomic Organization, IAEA, kind of goes there. But to be honest, what we should understand, it's not their mandate to record if the employees were tortured and electrocuted. It doesn't matter for them. It's just not their mandate. And everybody by default thinks that if they go there, there should be something. They're not allowed to get to a lot of places. And it's just I can go in lens, and I really won't do that because I'm also absorbed by the story. The more you start to talk to that, you kind of sucked by that, because you just can't comprehend how bad this situation is. Because like Kakhovka Dam was reservoir extremely important for cooling down the water, is not there, and there is a discussion that we would find to drill some wells. And you don't drill a well in that place. So but the idea that it's all kind of tolerated on the global scale, and something very important, it cannot be that the Rosatom, the Russian major company, is not aware, because they control the station. They actually stolen a station which called billions. And it cannot, there is no technical way that, if somebody is working on this restricted area, those who are in control, they should know if the person is taken from the working space and disappear for half a year, but the point that the company prolongs operate everywhere, in Europe, in the US, in France. They sign contracts. They sometimes are just not really bluffing, but if you go to the webpage of the Rosatom, you can see that, we signed a new contract in Indonesia, and then in Turkey, and then in Brazil, and then we do this, and then we do International Nuclear Conference on Safety. And it's happening. And that's really, for me, the biggest thing. And somehow you first think that, the threat is so big, so we don't know how to get to that. But there are answers. So for instance, Ukrainians saying yes, the world is dependent on Rosatom, it cannot just disappear, but put a sanctions, what we call delayed sanctions. So for instance, they are at least not allowed to build new power or new stations somewhere, at least not to work for future, so that new companies, new countries won't be dependent on those, because it's very hard to. So it's such a complex thing that, unfortunately, by the way, it sounds complex if you really think about the scale, but in the end, isn't it enough that for 2 years, I'm speaking about the dozens of people, including have been killed, because there were recorded the cases of the murder of the diver who died in the cell. And I personally talked to 2 people who kind of were witnesses to that, and we have more recordings that this diver died, and it's confirmed, and they go on. So I think that there could be more actions, but in this, this particular story, though I'm kind of co-author of it, it's very hard to explain. However, it's simple. It just we shouldn't have people with the guns at the nuclear power station, full stop, and everything should be done, because that can't be tolerable, because this is also the precedent.
Right. In this matter, I think it's really very important aspect that you, Natalka, mentioned, that it's exactly because it's so unprecedented, that's why it's tolerated, though it shouldn't have been the case at all. But with regards to this, actually disregard, I've been also wondering from all of you 3 perspectives, what's your take on since you've been working extensively with international media outlets, in your perception or in your especially encounters throughout the last 2 years or so, what has been your experience? Do you think that these type of approaches, these documentary-based and legally related attitudes and approaches that you embraced, has it have any impact on foreign journalism, on other journalists, on your counterparts abroad? Did it change journalism as such? Have you any kind of do you have a feeling that this type of war that you have been covering and investigating, and your take on this war, did change the way journalists report or the way they work, or it's like more or less the same in comparison, especially with over the last 10 years?
Actually, yes, it did. One of the things that people have is called compassion fatigue. That means I see Ukrainian every day in the TV. And I'm normalizing every violence happen to them, because in the end of the day, I start to not dehumanize the people, but the violence itself is so normalized, I don't feel it anymore. I have apathy. So compassion fatigue is something very dangerous. And if we reflect of what's happening in Ukraine, people with time, they got tired of being in solidarity with Ukrainians. So it's very important to create a documentary to show that what's happening in Ukraine is not only an act of violence that is limited to Ukraine, but it's something that is getting bigger. And for Chernobyl, for example, and I understand the dilemma that Nataliya was talking about, usually in international law, we have something called how there is an articles that describe the situation about facilities that contains dangerous power. That means a dam, a nuclear reactor, other highly chemical or MBC factors, we call them nuclear, biological, and chemical. So they have certain things that they should be protected and pacified. Chernobyl is a very unique case because it's a decommissioned nuclear reactor, but, and this is the dangerous thing, but it has a live nuclear radioactive fuel. And one of the things that the stupid barbarism that we saw on the TV, that you see people, they like, sometimes I feel like they don't care for their own soldiers. How could of this craziness that you go for a highly radioactive and you create a small barricade? I'm afraid of the amazing bombardment, but I will die of radiation. It's crazy. The second point is, what happened is the looting. I loot a certain truck that is so heavy, so slow, ugly, I cannot even sell. But this truck is very important to remove this radioactive fuel, for example, the cars. Why you steal it or destroy it? Why? So they did that. So basically what they did, and this is the dangerous thing, and there was reporting on it, that the commission of such a fuel is very delicate thing, because if this fuel is heated, it would radiate even more. And this radiation can be even sensitized in Sweden. So the stupidity of such barbarism not only affected some people that, oh, I like this truck that is so slow and I cannot sell, they destroy it or steal it, but they stopped the whole decommissioning process that we took years. Like they put the process way back. So the danger in the Chernobyl is not easy, because the decommissioning was interrupted in a very, very, very unscientific and unresponsible way. For Zaporizhia, one of the things that I was so amazed of, if you discuss the what is a lawful target when you are targeting Zaporizhia at a certain point, the Russian, they didn't have any reason to target the power station. Usually I would target a certain power station if I have a reason to target it. Like for example, it is giving energy to a military base. But most of the connection was giving energy for cities, like normal cities. So they destroy it and then they connected it with the Russian grid. Where is the lawful thing? So basically it's another way of looting. If you discuss it, you know, like all of this is so unresponsible action when they do all of this. So you want to steal it, so you destroyed a electricity station that is being powered by this amazing reactor, but at the same time you could jeopardize the whole reactor. They didn't care. Like this unreasonable act sometimes is so crazy. And it's very important to highlight, like for the actual Russian population themselves, guys, your army is doing fuckery in these places. Be careful, you know, because you will be targeted. Like what happened to all these soldiers that were vomiting in the buses with such high radiation? I doubt half of them is alive now after 1 year. I doubt it. But again, the Russians do not publish anything about these things. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the question you asked. Like, I cannot tell how the impact to international journalists is, but for us, it's all the time harder and harder to find this approach, the approach to the audience, the human approach that somebody would be, as Raji said, still touched by the topic. And with the nuclear topic, it's something completely different, because even harder, because it's already so intense, and then when people hear it second time, third time, it's like really not touching them, so you don't know what you can tell more. And the biggest complication, I would say, that to find this. But still there are some long-term impact, I would say, not dedicated to nuclear case, but still. Maybe you will tell proper how the commission is named, that about the two generals that was mentioned in our film, that was a head of these occupiers of the zone. Like the materials of this film, of this research, was used for
sanctioning two
of these generals. Yeah, so actually they, because of the work, because of the media work, because without the media evidences, only some facts are not enough for sanctions.
So in some of the cases, there is no, for instance, opportunity that we submit something for sanctions, but if it's mentioned in the media and verified by the reasonable publication, so we have that. But I want to maybe also summarize on this media thing partially. I'm responsible for that. Just today, I've just come from Kyiv, so it was like 20 hours journey in the train all the time. So I finished the book on the disappeared in Argentina, about the tortures and the horrible events happening in 70s and 80s. And there was a phrase which caught me. It was by the book is by the one of the journalists from Buenos Aires Herald, and he was speaking about the person who was in exile and was coming to the airport to meet the people who were coming from from Argentina. And he said, like, he was just wanted to greet them, and that is a quote. He said that one young man told him a tragic story. His brother had been killed, his father's house has been blown up by the army, his wife was pregnant, he had no money, no work, and nowhere to sleep. Ricardo patted him gently on the shoulder and said, well, if you would have any problems, let me know. And I sometimes feel that how we're talking to our survivors and how we all are in there, we kind of tolerate that all these horrors are okay. We maybe would help if you have some emergency. But emergency has already happened. The tragedy of the war thing is that contrary to the law, the more evidence you have, the bigger pattern. The solid evidence in the court, the more things Raji can do, tell, and argue. For me as an editor, the more similar crime is, the more evidence I have, the more systematic it is, the less anybody is interested, because it's not a story, it's not new. It's hundreds attack. Oh, it's 10th person from the same prison cell. It's electrocuted in the very same way. Oh, you have 150 people electrocuted. Okay, we already wrote about 2. So I think that is a huge challenge. However, we rethought the approach. For us, and what's keeping the whole our team going is saying that, like, journalists treat things as tragedies, and tragedies leave us powerless. We treat those things as crimes, and crimes need to be persecuted. People should be accountable, and it empowers you to act. And that thinking helps, at least for us. It doesn't change international journalism, but at least there are a couple of people who really don't stop. And I think this, and sometimes I'm capable to persuade the editors that no, it's not another tragedy, we still need to do that. So I think for the 3rd year, and maybe something also to add, on the 2nd year of the war, in the very early stage, everybody told us, and how you can do that while the war is ongoing? 2 years after, we're looking at a lot of testimonies of year 2022, and we know clearly if we haven't recorded them, even if there won't be the investigation, they won't be collected. And now I read more historic evidence on other crimes. And yes, there were court cases in Yugoslavia, in other, but so many had been lost. In fact, peanuts were recorded. And one of the very fascinating book, again, I read a different one on also, it was still on the crimes of Holocaust in Latvia, when the lawyers were accused, one of the perpetrators, and he was punished for murdering of the 13,000 people. But at that particular wood, there were 36,000 people were killed. And the question was like, so what happened to these 20,000? And they said like the prosecutors were able to accuse and have the evidence just about 13,000. And in history, the person is prosecuted for 13,000, as if these 20,000 didn't exist. So we understand that in the end, just what has been recorded has a chance to be investigated. So let at least do as much as we can, and even if it won't be investigated all, from all the history I know, what we know is just very, very small part. And even now, after 2 years of the war in Ukraine, I'm full-time there, I know that there are way more stories. Even now, despite all the international investigation, transparency, prosecutors, all this human rights organization, national, international, we just, we documented just a very small part of it. So it's like, it's endless thing.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to add something very quickly about the media work. Actually, it's a problem that now I'm facing when we are talking about certain cultural elements that being attacked, and it's being attacked within the vulnerable segment of the Ukrainian population, that is children, because now I'm focusing on that. And one of the things that horrifies me is not only the killing that I'm seeing. I'm a bit autistic, so these are numbers, but what really horrifies me is the way that a certain narrative that create a foundation for some kind of a cultural domination is being pushed. And this is something very dangerous, because the first step, if you want to establish a matrix of so many variables working to create a genocide, this is number 2 after the dehumanizing and killing of the actual population, is when you start to push for cultural domination. That would lead for ethnic cleansing. Like we will push the people who are not accepting such culture. A system of indoctrination of beliefs is being pushed about a population. These things, if you look at them alone, they are innocent. I indoctrinate my kids to believe in Santa Claus that brings them gifts. It's innocent. But what happened when you start to push a complete system of beliefs on a population that they don't relate to, and you want to make sure that you don't have a history. It's our history. You are part of that history. Oh, you don't exist. You are a shadow, and you push it. So you have the killing, the pain, and you push such cultural domination. So the media have to act in a way as an indicator of memory and to fight such a propaganda and misinformation. I will stop here.
Yeah, thanks so much. I will in a moment pass the microphone to the audience, but just using this opportunity having you here, I think you are the best the best persons to ask the following, since you have been working also, especially in Talca and Raji, so extensively for a long time throughout the Middle East over the last decade. I think, as I also like several times read in several articles, and I do believe this is exactly the case, that that Ukraine, especially over the last 2 years, is very much like a Syrian case. right? And I will also refer to you for that matter. It's just I was just wondering, maybe you can draw some, if I may put so, some comparisons between the East European post-Soviet context, Ukraine in particular, and the Middle Eastern one, right? Especially with regards to Syria and Iraq. How do you? Are there any lessons to be drawn for the emergence of this Russia's war against Ukraine from what happened in Syria and Iraq over the last actually 20 years, and vice versa? Maybe in light of the ongoing crisis in the Middle East, there is something that you also investigated and learned from the Ukrainian context applicable for the Middle East as well.
Yeah. I will start with this, not sure. Raji, sorry. But actually I wanted to say, like, if not to go deeper, the main thing is just an impunity and unpunished evil, because like we are working on the other film and big film, and actually the research started on the such kind of war crime as deliberately shelling of civilian objects. And we concentrated on maternity hospitals, and our colleague Angelina Karakina was interviewing people who was in different cities and towns, starting from Mariupol maternity hospitals, but then it happened in many places. And she started her research. Meanwhile, she learned and get acquaintance with many victims of the shelling of maternity hospital in Aleppo, which was also done by Russian forces. And then she came up with witnesses of completely the same story from Grozny, from Republic of Ichkeria, which is Chechnya, also known. And so we see that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, like the pattern is completely similar. Absolutely. Like the first destruction is the destruction of the mosque, like a fortress for people that they imagine that it's kind of the last place that could be shelled, especially deliberately. And so this thing is breaking something inside people, like really much more powerful than the shelling of the military objects, because there is no resistance, no power to stay against the perpetrators. But the most, the biggest thing that it shows that like how world closed the eyes what Russia did in Syria, and especially what Russia did in Chechnya, like it's even was made by the same people. So it's like the same person. So it's not even the pattern. It's not even behavior. It's like a politics of how military operates, how they do it, and the impunity and zero like prosecution, or even like any statement, like the complete blindness of the world for this. Make it possible in the new conflicts. And yeah, I don't know when it can start.
To you to speak, you worked in Syria.
Yeah, it was Syrian topic.
Basically,
works. It is.
Yes, I was sorry, I was spirited now. You know, one of the beauty of searching for pattern is something called superposition, where you bring certain something and you superimpose it on another something. So you have a case with a certain element and you superimpose it on another case on top of each other, and you see the similarities. What you see now, even the scale was bigger in Chechnya, but it's the same way of doing stuff, and it grows bigger, more aggressive. So if you go for smaller scale of what we see in Syria, but the destruction and the ability of the destruction that was happened is way bigger than the scale, even in smaller areas, if you consider. But the amount of destruction, the quickness, the swiftness, they are getting even better in destroying things. And then they are taking this scale, this operation in a bigger scale in Ukraine. So they are taking it now in a more horrific way, and they are increasing it. So as I see it, if we don't stop the Russians in Ukraine, poor the country that they will do their operation after. I don't know which East European country, or maybe inside NATO, because if I believe that a certain higher power makes me divine, so I can take people's life, people's houses, and it's okay, I can build it. It's more money for me later, like what they did in Chechnya, or what they are doing in Mariupol, building all these skyscraper buildings, you know. They want to hide their crime quickly, you know. Like, if I believe something like this, no one will stop me later. So if we don't stop them in Ukraine, God have mercy on what country that will come after, because the destruction would be crazy.
And I think we should also understand the differences in Ukraine is the one that Ukraine is partially managed to stop it. And that's the only difference, that Ukraine is resisting and is capable to defend with a particular type of weapon. So Kyiv is not like that, Kharkiv is not like Mariupol, Odessa are not. Otherwise they would be in just air defense, nothing but. Otherwise they would be. It's the only reason. Or some of the cities like we're speaking about the Eastern Ukraine. And for me, yes, I worked a bit in the Middle East, and as a Ukrainian, I should say, like, still for me is the most horrific story and the most horrific interviews I've done in my life. They were the ones from the people fleeing Aleppo. Not, you know, I've never seen anything. I have never seen such a compassion, because we have something to rely upon. You know, I have a country to rely upon. We are not in such a horrible things because we have the country defending us. Those people fleeing from Aleppo has nobody to rely. They don't have state. And I think that for me, that's like the ultimate victims. But even with the investigation of the war crimes, I also say, our colleague Janine Djubani, one of the co-founders, she worked for previous, you know, covered a lot of wars, including the war in Syria and the others, and she speaks in length about the accountability and impunity. I'm not really that much into that. I wish, but I don't think that we'll kind of punish that much people, and even those ones who destroyed Aleppo. I really thinking that, like, if things are not stopped in Ukraine, where there is every premise to do something because there is a will, there is a transparency, there is a society, there is a functioning state, there is international attention. If we are not capable to stop something or demand accountability with a perfect premise, you have all the evidence you can have, you have all access you can have, it's not really that impossible. It means all the system doesn't matter, and later it won't be stopped. And that means that we just legitimize for future all possible crimes which are committed now. So therefore, I do think about it not as impunity, but as a prevention. And I do think that's my message, is that we in Ukraine work globally, but also, you know, more for, not for warning. I'm not speaking about warning. And there, I highly suggest to watch the film on Kramatorsk, because this quote for me probably is like one of the strongest about explanation why we're also doing that. There is a film about the Kramatorsk train station shown here. And there is a lady who lives in Dresden. She was a survivor, and she's a witness. She's a survivor of the attack, missile attack in Kramatorsk. Her husband was killed, pieces of body. They were volunteers helping people to flee. And I talked to her. It's in the film, but I think I want to do that, to tell it again. They were, you know, evangelical, very. They wanted to volunteer. So she's really like going to the church, unlike myself. And I asked Olena, "What are you? Why are you talking to me? You know, what do you want?" She said, like, "I'm not seeking for the perpetrators to be punished. It's just God who will punish them. You know, I'm not speaking for the retribution, for the reckoning. Nothing like that is interested to me. But my life is destroyed. So maybe if we do something and somebody would be put, you know, accountable, maybe somebody else's life in future won't be destroyed." And that was such a powerful quote, not for Ukraine, but generally, that I thought, like, it's actually driving me strongly for further work, that it's still about people speak about accountability. I really speak about prevention first of all.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I'm happy to open up the Q&A round. So just raise your hand and I will assist you with the microphone if you have any questions or comments.
It's already very heavy.
Yeah, it's meant to be so, yeah, definitely.
Vasil, there is a second mic.
Yeah, right, no problem.
Thank you, like for all your thoughts you shared already. I wanted to ask a question because you mentioned the word of compassion fatigue, and like you're documenting only a tiny little bit. You mentioned, but how to still maybe use the data of what you save and what you cover to put more agency. So, for example, you're a diverse group of filmmakers, of researchers, of data scientists, but what else could be used for that? For example, I'm thinking about in some years it might be part of school books. So how do you see also the data?
It can be memorial in very, very, very many ways. Like we published a book, for now it's here only in Ukrainian now, but it hopefully will be soon translated. We did different forms of video. We work with exhibitions. There is also a documentary theater, British one, I don't remember. So there will be a theater play. So we try to use this in different forms. Of course, we are not doing it by ourselves because we are not we are different, but not so much. But if there any person or any research, white artist, anybody who eager to work with the topic, who wants to create something, we really try to collaborate and share what we can share and give this opportunity to create something more. So there are many, many ways, but the most important is that this will be these stories will be spread and not. I'm not telling forgotten, but it's working. Yeah, we see on our example that any mentioning works because there are different audiences, different people, different ages, different countries. For each country, what is working for Europe, what is working for Germany, doesn't work in Argentina or doesn't work in US. So, or we working with Korea, with we're trying to find a different approach for each country, and to find a specific. Whenever we're doing any material, we are also thinking where we can publish it and what will be the not personal, but interest of this country, precise country. Like in Argentina, it's one story, and in South Korea, it's completely different. In Japan, it's different. But we all the time has to work with the local journalists, artists, etc. But so we're trying to do this and engage, but of course, we're not doing this by our own.
Actually, if I may add to the amazing Lyuba talk, there is this amazing story from Rwanda when I was young and I wanted to learn something. They told me the stories always glorify the hunters because the lion does not know how to write. Okay? So basically, the first something we have to make sure is the Ukrainian people have the ownership of anything that is being provided, because sometimes we come to a space and we love people so much we want to think for them, so we don't allow them to think. And sometimes we don't allow them to even have a voice because we want to be their voice. So as long as we respect the Ukrainian ownership and the creativity, this is the first step to tell them that this is a real human story that we want to transmit. And the transmission, as my colleague they're saying, there are so many beautiful ways and there are so many amazing social media. I'm a dinosaur, I don't know about these things, but younger generation know better than me, So this is the first something. And the second thing that is very important to combat human fatigue, to combat compassion fatigue is don't do the narrative of, oh, poor Ukrainians. This is so... personally, it makes me angry when I see it. Oh, poor Ukrainian. They are poor. They are not poor, they are heroes, they are fighting for the whole world, you know? So we have to bring not only the despair and the sadness, but the hope that is within that story and highlight it in an amazing creative way. And this is something, when you go to the actual people, like this amazing woman that you talked about, she gave us an amazing wisdom, you know? The eyes of the person that sees the despair have the best of the light and hope. And this is something we have to also highlight to fight the compassion fatigue.
Yeah, I just want to add shortly to Raji that it is the other thing that is really complicated to talk, I think for Nataliya also, with different editors international, that it's everybody expect tragedy, everybody expect tears, and that people are supposed to hear the stories and cry and be like in some ecstatic sorrow. But like one film about Yahidne, last year it was on the Time magazine, and the editors of the Time magazine was asking, like the first, like some cuts of the film, they were telling like why people are laughing, and they were so angry, like said like, you are telling the story how the whole village was sitting as a hostage for 1 month in a small cellar, and they telling the story and then laughing hilariously, and we said like, yeah, that's how people are, like they're happy, they're alive, they're sharing their stories, they're showing how they, but so it's really complicated to push people to see the human and not to, like, you know, try to grab, so all the readers will die in sorrow or something. So should be inspired, but this
I think it's
is
a
like
lot
really
about
cool.
the inspiration. First of all, yes, we work a lot globally, and I myself always surprised how the Nicaraguan journalist at the moment talking to the teacher from Kherson says like they torture the very same way, and the head of the community from Kherson region talking to South Korean journalists we helped to bring to Ukraine. Right from the beginning, we didn't tell him anything. He said, like, my biggest fear is there would be another 38th parallel near my village. So people know how to tell the stories in relatable way. But I also changed. I'm pretty radical. I remember myself when there was a fall of Aleppo, and I talked to my husband who lived in a different city, and I heard that he was chewing something, and I said like, what are you eating? And he said like, I'm eating sausage. And I said like, what the hell, how do you have a human right to eat a sausage while Aleppo is falling? And he said like, are you strange? And I said like, you can't eat tonight. And like now, yesterday I was editing my story about tortures. I was eating because it was my only time to eat, to be honest. But I know, like, I understand that we need to live with that, but I'm constantly inspired by these people. I talked to the guy, we recently had a guy talking to our lawyer from Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, speaking about his tortures, and I asked him, what are you gonna to do next? And he said like, but tomorrow is a Valentine's Day, I have here the cafe, so I need to put these hearts, you know, in the cafe to decorate it. We went to this cafe yesterday, it was the best cafe in Kyiv, the best breakfast I had last half a year, and I like that place, and I like the guy. Another person, her husband was for 44 days in electrocuted, tortured in Berdyansk. They came to Kyiv. I talked to them and asked like, what are you doing now? And after that, they opened school in the basement in Zaporizhzhia, and she was for half an hour speaking how she dreams to open the kindergarten there, because the city is so heavily shelled that they want to rent 2 more basements in order to also have the kindergarten. And you talk to these people and you say like, it's there, you're so inspired by them, each of them whom we talk. So I really think that that's a way. And yes, I'm very radical on compassion fatigue. I demand people to really do this job. But I think that, you know, you just need to see somehow how strong people are, how they inspire. And yes, I'm probably often accused of being too optimistic about Ukraine, but I see how defended we are. I told already that. So I do think that, you know, there is a way, and I think that's for us to fight the compassion fatigue, because it's usually there, where you see yourself powerless, but we are not.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. I wanted to ask one question because you're all now on adrenaline, right? It's happening while you're working. So maybe like where you have like more history of this, like how can in the future people deal with the traumas? Like, whoa, how can you, like, I know it's maybe far away, but...
I think what we're doing, it is dealing with trauma already. And we are not on adrenaline already for a long time. I think at least a year.
For last year, it's gone already. Why ago? We are rarely holding on with the rest of the strands we have.
You know, there is this amazing lady called Toni Morrison. And she talks about this woman that suffered very horrible atrocities. And the whole family went crazy because of the torture and all these things happened, but she couldn't afford to be even crazy because she has to take care of everyone. So at the moment, what I see is the people, they don't afford to be traumatized. They have to be taking care of everyone. So in a certain point, what we have to make sure that everything is happening is being recorded. So a collective memory that the Ukrainian, in a certain point, when they have the ability to breathe freely, with no pressure, to sit and really mourn the death, grieve what happened, and heal. So sadly, the Ukrainian people, because of the amazing war, they don't have even the luxury to be feeling traumatized and act traumatized, because again, they have to take care of everything around them.
So I think that unless the story is told, it's like a cloud of pain. But I think we kind of trying to make the story out of that, and as long as it's said, and that's what I heard also from the people who watched the films. I'm speaking about the survivors themselves and the victims who watched. I think for them to take this side, that I'm not any longer the participant. I'm the viewer of that story. That's really helpful for them. I'm speaking about them. The rest I care less.
Yeah, any process of work with some meaning, it's healing. Not healing, but keeping a cool brain. I just was here before the biennial on the Berlinale, and the very first film I watched, it was like really funny for me, because the whole audience, the whole was like crying and really sad. And it was a film about female prison, like action film, like not documentary. Female prison in Argentina, and there was like lots of serious topics about violence and everything. But actually, I was watching these heroes of the film, and they were hanging out in the prison, and it was kind of warm, and they were reading books, sleeping, talking to each other. And I said, oh my God, I need this kind of a retreat urgently. So I was like inspired to see this prison where people are talking to each other and reading books and discovering their trauma or something. And it was like really the start of my Berlin trip here, and I hope I will not be in prison, but I will find somewhere this possibility to reflect once. But for now, we are not. We're reflecting in process. Yeah.
Yeah. If there are any other comments or questions, because I believe we still have some few minutes to wrap it up. But actually, I have to say that that the question about trauma is, of course, super complicated, right? And it has so many dimensions, and not even just dimensions, but also it's a generational issue. It's a profoundly generational issue. And by the way, we will have on our program a separate event dedicated exactly to those matters, in particular of trying to reflect with the help of a bunch of psychoanalysts what is the role of analysis, psychoanalysis and political analysis in war during the war. But it's definitely, one can say for sure that you've got a problem till the rest of this century, but not only for Ukraine, but also beyond. Yeah.
But we also can see this trauma now, especially these days in Berlin, like with like the trauma that nobody wants to talk about, like mid 20th century was anti-Semitic thing, and that is coming now into different trauma that nobody can actually talk about what is going on in Gaza, and then it brings the next level of trauma, and it's awful. And we see how this of course there was like good work with this trauma, like I would say huge work was done, but where we are now, it's awful. And that you have to, that all the tragedies that happen people are somehow start to compare. That's also often awful thing, because it leads to like underestimating of each separate story. So the work with the trauma has to start
it
in
should
the
be
beginning.
never done. Yeah, it should be never done.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
So I think we can continue in a more informal manner at the bar afterwards. But Lyuba, Natalka, Raji, thank you so much again.